Across Nigeria, the cost of flooding exceeds all other natural disasters in any given time because there is 80% chance that there is no or little proactive control measures in place to prevent or manage flooding events whenever they occur. It is unfortunate that floods has affected 33 out of the 36 states, and all federal agencies dealing with rescue and disaster management have been tasked by the federal government to scale up their responses. The United Nations has said that the effects of climate change are at stake in Nigeria, and the country lies at risk of frequent and intense flooding. In 2012, rivers busted their banks and submerged vast land in 30 states, killing over 400 people and displacing 1.3 million others. According to the UN, in 2019, more than 200,000 people were affected by floods and 158 were killed. Flooding can be devastating in every aspect, from property and infrastructure, damage to loss of life, and wider health impact. As flooding becomes increasingly common for more people in a warming world, we look at its impact on the human health. Flooding is the most common natural disaster globally, affecting more than 2 billion people worldwide between 1998 and 2017, and with 44% of disasters worldwide associated with it. The health impact of disasters like flooding are complex and cascading and can impact anyone or population simultaneously. The kind of health risk any given community might experience, the severity of them, and just how vulnerable they might be differ depending on various factors, which are the geography, population size and density, as well as level of preparedness and resilience are part of it. The flood's characteristics also play into this, whether it's flash flood, coastal flood, riverine flood, or permanent flood for low-lying areas. Flood can directly and indirectly affect human health in both the short and long term. Additionally, it's not just communities who have experienced flooding whose health is at risk, but it includes the health of disaster responders, healthcare professionals, and critical service providers who can also be affected. Another area to look at during this process of rescue or during a flooding incident is drowning. This often happens, and this is on the top of our mind when it comes to health risk of flooding. But the risk can range from injuries, hypothermia, and animal bites to infectious diseases, undernutrition, and mental health problems. When disasters like floods strikes, there is a lot of focus on economic impact and property damage, as well as human casualties. But these also overlap with health concerns in many ways. Flooding can strain health services due to damaged infrastructure, loss of health professionals, and access to medicines, which could delay care of treatment for those who need it. The economic fallout or loss of possession and livelihood due to flooding disaster can result in financial uncertainty that may affect mental health, to say nothing of the grief from losing loved ones. Diseases and outbreaks are another major health concern in the event of flooding. This can come in the form of waterborne diseases, which are those that come from drinking or coming into contact with contaminated waters. This can include diarrhoea, cholera, typhoid, and leptospirosis. It can also sometimes be vector-borne diseases, which come from an intermediate species carrying diseases, pathogens like a mosquito, vector-borne diseases that come about from flooding, including dengue fever and malaria. Flooding increases the risk of these diseases and potential outbreak in a population because it can cause sewage overflow as well as damage to water supply and sanitation facilities. Contamination of drinking water can lead to the typhoid fever, cholera, and hepatitis A. In areas at risk of coastal flooding, there is also the possibility of saltwater intrusion to drinking water, as well as hypertension and eclampsia. Once floodwaters have receded, stagnant water left behind in gardens or part of the homes or even farming lands can become a breeding ground for mosquitoes and lead to diseases like dengue or malaria. Additionally, displacement and eventual overcrowding in IDP camps before the flood can be handled can bring about other issues such as pulmonary and systemic fungal infections from molds. According to the European Climate and Health Observatory, people that have evacuated to temporary shelters are more likely to be exposed to infectious diseases and pathogens, so they are more prone to health problems. Mental health problem is not also left out. This can occur later after often overlooked and not as well studied relatively to the immediate health impact caused by the flooding. So far, it is known that the experience of surviving a flood disaster can impact people after the event and sometimes for many years down the line. That also drags up to anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is normally known as PTSD. Psychosis and insomnia are some of the common mental health problems that come up in the aftermath of a flooding disaster. The process of cleanup is another area we need to look at. So during cleanup and recovery, trying to rebuild can be a source of stress, and this can impact more on the government and private sectors. As part of the flooding impact, disruption to basic facilities and supplies such as electricity, water, and food can likewise be distressing and impact mental health, especially when these are prolonged for a period of time. Another area is the undernutrition or malnutrition, which can affect the people who are suffering from flood disasters because victims has been known to eat less during or after flooding and often lost access to regular food supplies because food systems such as agriculture can also be significantly disrupted because of flood. This can affect both the quantity and quality of food which is available, and that will lead to food insecurity and undernutrition. But what can we do about this problem as a nation? I think Nigeria should look deeply into these areas. Learning to adapt will be a very crucial area to deal with the health impact of flooding, alongside mitigation efforts such as reducing such possibility of flooding and having possible panacea in place to deal with them whenever they occur. In Europe alone, it is estimated that without preventive measures, up to 2.2 million people will be exposed to coastal flooding by 2100. That number goes down to 1.4 million people with moderate mitigation measures but without adaptation, and also low as 0.6 million if adaptation is factored in. Nigeria as a nation will need to adopt proactive measures and invest in foreseeable mitigative apparatus to ensure that the issue of flooding is properly managed. The health impact of flooding can only get worsened if the world does not take decisive and swift action on climate change. I think that it is important to recognize that climate change has come to stay, and humans just need to deal with it, and this is the way out from this type of disasters.